so pleased and honored and just excited to be collaborating with CEDO. This is Alan Berman. And I mean, how many of you are members of CEDO?
Yeah.
Oh, we can.
Yeah.
I'm also curious, how many of you were able to join us for our first lecture about a month ago with Barbara? Awesome. Good. Well, welcome back. And yeah, Alan, please tell us a little bit about what you guys are up to.
Yeah, okay. My notes. So hi everyone, welcome. My name is Alan Berman. I'm the communications coordinator for the Intercultural Center for the Study of Deserts and Oceans, more commonly known as CEDO. And we are also really happy to be collaborating with the University of Arizona on this lecture series. We're lucky to have a very diverse and distinguished audience with us tonight. And it's great to see people, repeat customers coming back for more information. Also, it's just great that you guys are interested in issues across the U.S.-Mexican border. We are called CEDO Intercultural for a reason. I was born in Mexico myself, and I think during this political climate particularly, it's really important that we strengthen these bridges between our two countries. So this might sound like a bit of an aside, but I'm currently taking a community class at U of A with the renowned dissident Noam Chomsky. And it's very lucky. The class is about politics, which is one of the themes of tonight's lecture. And in this class, Chomsky makes clear that we have a broken system. And the reason it's broken is because very few people are getting short-term profits, while the majority of us are paying for them either now or for generations to come. He then talks about how the powers that be will sweep the resulting problems, be they social, economic, or ecological, under the rug for as long as they can, until eventually someone lifts the rug up, or the rug gets lifted and a big dust cloud forms, and who's left to clean up the mess? The people who are most immediately affected, and those happen to be local communities. So in the case of the Northern Gulf, we're in that dust cloud. There's less than 30 vaquita. You may have heard, if you're following the issue, that international volunteers have been attacked by groups of fishermen. Government helicopter crashed into the sea. Fishermen have been rioting. Our own staff feels unsafe often in the field as they navigate dangerous mafias. So the region's problems have really come to a head, or to a boiling point. And we expect a reaction from the government. So Chomsky also talks about how when things can't get any worse, the government has to act. And we are expecting that action to come soon, and we're hoping it's positive and it's vigorous. And so that brings me to why our director, Peggy Turkboyer, can't be here tonight. She's actually in Mazatlan meeting with the top brass of the government fisheries authorities about a program we have called the Corridor Program, which I can't go into now, but it's very clearly outlined in our TIE calendar, which we have for sale, so make sure you pick one up tonight. And that program has the potential to set a model for how the Northern Gulf can move forward. Also, the other speaker who's going to come tonight, Pablo Curiel of the World Wildlife Fund, unfortunately couldn't join us, and the reason is because he's also in the field. His boss wouldn't let him come. He's actually pushing forward alternative gear to catch shrimp, the most economically and probably socially important fishery, but also one of the most impactful. And so if that work doesn't happen right now, the vaquita will go extinct, and that's why he's not here tonight. And both Peggy and Pablo asked me to apologize profusely on their behalf. They really wanted to be here, and especially supporting Brooke. Just one more note. Because the government is changing in Mexico and things are difficult right now, a lot of CEDO's grant funders are developing new strategies. And while they wait to develop these strategies, the vaquita can't wait. The communities, the starving fishermen, they can't wait. And CEDO's very important work certainly can't wait. And so it would really help us tonight if you could help us keep our staff, who altogether have put more than 100 years of time into this issue, if we could keep them on board, and if we could keep them on the ground doing this work that I know all of you feel is important, that would be wonderful. And one very easy way to do that is to purchase Brooke's book, Vaquita, Science, Politics, and Crime in the Sea of Cortez. We have it for sale. We also have t-shirts, we have jewelry, and you're welcome to make a donation to CEDO. So I'll be in the adjoining room after the lecture, and it would be great if everyone here could come and just buy a little token so we can keep hosting these free events and keep doing the work that I know is so important to everybody here. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. And it really is the work that CEDO's been pushing the 40th anniversary right now, the work that Peggy and Rick and so many others have pioneered, and having that center in the Gulf of California, a space for natural history, a space for students, a space for knowledge, and a space for working with the communities, and having that constant presence in the region makes a huge difference when you come to issues such as this, where things just get so complicated so fast, and you have so many people trying to attack it from so many angles, and having that trust and respect that's anchored in the region. I mean, you can't even talk about how important that is. We're so fortunate to have Brooke Bessesen here with us tonight, and her book, Vaquita, which I really, really recommend everyone here to get a copy of and to read. And so Brooke comes at this really from the angle of wildlife biology, and over 30 plus years of experience with that. And as we were just chatting, you know, when she was working on this book over the last about 2 years, it was unfolding in front of her. I mean, she didn't have the opportunity to reflect back and go to the archives, and I mean, and that continues to be the case right now. I mean, you just heard that Peggy and Pablo aren't here because it's more important that they're there doing the work and making these connections. Where we are tonight is going to be different from where we are next month and where we are at the end of this series. It is such a rapidly evolving story, and well, Brooke's going to just drop us right into the middle of it. And so, without further ado, Brooke, thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you all for braving the cold to be here tonight. I too am sad that Pablo couldn't join us because I really wanted to hear his talk as well. He was going to be talking about gillnets, and I've done my best to include some of that information in my talk this evening so that hopefully I can give you still a good idea of the process and problems with gillnets. Yeah, this is a really important lecture series, and I'm super grateful to the University of Arizona and to CEDO for hosting it. And I want to take a moment and just say that it was at CEDO's field station in Rocky Point, Mexico, that I first learned about vaquita. And that was in 2008. I bought this t-shirt. And little did I know that this shirt would lead me on such a remarkable journey. Over a period of about 2 years, starting in 2016, I traveled back and forth to Mexico to research the vaquita crisis. And it is only thanks to the dozens of people who shared their knowledge and their stories from townspeople and scientists, fishermen, activists, and NGO leaders on both sides of the border that I was able to write such a comprehensive book. With their help, I am now entirely focused on solutions. There's a saying, to bide time, B-I-D-E. It means to wait patiently for an opportunity to arise. We can't do that with vaquita. It's not even an option. But to buy time means to acquire time through sacrifice or great effort. And that may prove the only way that we will save this species. Vaquitas are only found in one place, at the top of the Gulf of California, also known as the Sea of Cortez. And as you can see, there are 3 tiny communities around the top of the Gulf there. El Golfo, over on the left is San Felipe, at the top El Golfo de Santa Clara, and then Puerto Peñasco on the right, or Rocky Point, where I bought my shirt. Unlike other species that are facing myriad threats, vaquita suffers just one: gillnets. Gillnets are the most common type of fishing gear used in the waters where vaquitas live. These are relatively easy and cheap, easy for fishermen to use. They simply hang them in the water, either loose in the current or attached with anchors, and they can come back hours or even days later to haul in their catch. Unfortunately, gillnets are not very discriminating, and so all kinds of animals get entangled and drown in them. Animals like whales and dolphins, sea lions, sea turtles, sharks, rays. The list goes on, and of course, vaquitas. When I started my research, I knew that vaquitas had been dying in commercial gillnets for decades, and that most of that seafood had been imported to the United States, which means that for years, we Americans were eating vaquita extinct, and we didn't even know it. That was the story I expected to tell, the story I expected to write. A straightforward look at the conflicts between conservation and industry. Just to be clear, this is what I pictured when I planned my first trip south, when I was packing my car. I thought about an adorable porpoise, struggling to survive in a changing world. But when I arrived in Mexico, this was my introduction to vaquita. A photo from that morning's find on a nearby beach. And after the initial shock, the biologist I was with turned to me and he said the strangest thing. He said, "Well, there's one good thing about dead vaquitas." I thought, what could that possibly be? And he said, "Their bodies are proof that they exist." Apparently, vaquitas are so shy, so rarely seen, that many people in the region actually believe them to be mythical animals. They think they don't exist. And the following morning, I read an article about this death, and it didn't mention anything about entanglement. It didn't even mention gillnets. Instead, it suggested that perhaps red tide was the culprit. There have never been any reported vaquita deaths associated to red tide with toxicity. So I was stumped, and I remember thinking, why would the Mexican government spend $32 million a year trying to save vaquita, and nobody will even talk about gillnets as the issue? The answer is murky, but I think it helps for us to begin to think about the fact that gillnets have been used in the Gulf of California since the 1940s. They are used for almost every fishery. In fact, many fishermen have them in various sizes, depending on the season's target catch, right? So one fisherman I talked to, named Javier, he told me that if fishermen are honest, they have all killed vaquitas. And sitting on his couch in San Felipe, he shared a story with me about returning to his Sierra nets with his coworkers and discovering 2 vaquitas thrashing at the water surface. By the time they were able to cut the first one free, the other one had drowned. Javier is now dedicated to helping vaquita. Equipment like these, modified shrimp trawls and fish traps, are vaquita-friendly. And surprisingly, they have been available since 2008. Unfortunately, Mexico's national fisheries agencies, called PESCA, have knowingly obstructed the process of authorizing and permitting them. Even worse, PESCA insists that gillnets are not killing vaquitas. It's said that if they acknowledge vaquitas as bycatch, they will have to acknowledge all of the animals, all of the species that are entangled and drowned in gillnets. So they are motivated to deny. But there is a bigger problem. Commercial gillnets are no longer the main concern. In 2012, illegal fishermen began setting setting gillnets in the dark of night for a giant fish called totoaba. The totoaba, seen here above the vaquita, is the largest drumfish in the world. They once grew up to 7 feet long, over 300 pounds, and ran in schools by the hundreds that were said to roil the seas. Now they too are listed as critically endangered. The totoaba is poached for its swim bladder, that's its buoyancy organ. Dried like this one and smuggled from Mexico to China, often through the United States. They enter the same multi-billion-dollar black market in endangered wildlife parks that peddles in rhino horns and tiger bones and pangolin scales and Mexican cartels and Chinese mafia are now running this lucrative business. Indeed, the cartel situation was most alarming. Arriving in Mexico, I immediately began hearing stories about recent shootings relating to the totoaba trade and to police corruption. The people I interviewed, they didn't want their names revealed. I want to take a moment here and give you a look at the area and the 3 overlapping protected areas for vaquita. The light gray area up towards the top, if you can see it well enough, is the Biosphere Reserve. That was the earliest designation in 1993. And then in 2005, that dark pentagon was described as the vaquita refuge. And it is 800 square miles of core vaquita habitat. But it's the large gray area that I really want you to pay attention to. That is where, in 2015, then President Peña Nieto announced an emergency gillnet ban. That ban was made permanent in 2017 with the help of an American actor and environmentalist. Anybody know who that is? Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio, yes. So inside that rectangle, called the gillnet exclusion zone, all legal fisheries are closed. Does that stop illegal fishermen? No. Poaching is rampant. Mexican Navy officials say that as a military entity, they have limited authority to chase down the civilians, even if those civilians are poaching in broad daylight. But all the locals say, the Navy's on the take. It is no surprise then that these people are afraid to speak up against crime and corruption. I quickly discovered that this is not just a conservation crisis. This is a humanitarian crisis too. Even for people who don't give a whit about endangered species, it is still worth fighting for solutions to the problems in the upper Gulf. As I'm guessing you might be experiencing right now, learning about all this is so upsetting, right? On so many levels. I suffered serious compassion fatigue. This was really difficult to research and write and to be in the middle of, as you might imagine. And during the course of my research, the vaquita population dropped from about 60 individuals to probably less than 15. After Barb Taylor's talk last month, you're probably beginning to see that getting gillnets out of the water, the one and only thing needed to save vaquita, is simultaneously the most simple and most difficult task. We won't be able to solve this problem without getting our hands dirty. That means that we can't just stand on the sideline, with our arms crossed, spouting opinions. We are going to have to get in the trenches and make a real effort to understand the dynamics and complexities at play. And even then, it's not enough to know what has brought us to this grim moment. It's not even enough to say our hearts are broken. We all who care about vaquita need to take action. We need to begin to contribute whatever we can to the solutions. There is no silver bullet that will save vaquita. But I believe that if we supports several different strategies, each buying time. So maybe one strategy buys a few months. Maybe another strategy manages to slow the rate of decline by 5% a year. By working for long term with multiple levels, perhaps we can buy enough time, right, to begin addressing some of these bigger issues, like cultural biases and fisheries management, and the full scale of corruption, those kinds of things. Let me say up front that talking about, discussing solutions is not easy. Because for every action, there are real obstacles. And there are also conflicting ideas. And there are debilitating emotions, like fear and despair and frustration. Most importantly, for every action, there is a reaction with consequences, positive or negative, real or imagined, that affect the humans and other animals involved. Many people, including these folks on the screen here, are committed to this effort. And collaboration is critical, even when ideological differences arise. I write in my book that hope and reality can be tricky allies. But despite everything, I still have hope for vaquita. In fact, I have more hope than I've had in a long time. To start, Barb talked about some interesting and encouraging news last month. That is that in September, she and other scientists spotted 8 vaquitas. That suggests that the remaining population may be larger than we had guessed. And there were 2 calves in the mix, so reproduction is still robust. And because vaquitas are not predisposed to genetic decline, even a few individuals could actually allow the species to recover. It's good news, right? So a few months ago, a journalist named Richard called me for an interview for a New York Times piece. And Rich's expertise is in economics and politics and social change, and he is extremely well versed in Mexican culture. Rich told me that he didn't have much hope for vaquita, and he said he was really sad to be writing another depressing story about the topic. We're all caught in this constant stream of global bad news. And I told him I agreed. I myself spent 2 years detailing all of the problems that are pushing vaquita toward extinction. So I suggested to Rich that instead of rehashing history, that he focus forward and write the story of how we could save vaquita. A story of hope and courage and action. He was pretty much like, wow, I did not expect to hear words of hope out of your mouth. And I said, I do really have hope, and I do think this is a viable story. And he said, okay, tell me that story. What does that look like? What do we do? So here's pretty much what I told him. First, let's briefly talk about China. I wasn't able to fully investigate that end of the totoaba trade, but I'm told that cultural biases and corruption are at least as challenging in China as they are in Mexico. And yet, there are seeds of hope. This December, just right around Christmas, after years of ineffective enforcement, China moved to disband one of the largest totoaba rings in China. They made an arrest of 16 people, and they seized almost $26 million in totoaba swim bladders. This was really big news. Most people in China don't know anything about vaquita or its connection to the totoaba swim bladders. So education is essential. And there are outreach programs emerging. One of the biggest ones, one of the most exciting ones, is this film. A famous Chinese musician, a world-renowned concert pianist named Lang Lang, worked in alliance with an organization called Wild Aid to produce this documentary, Lang Lang Porpoises in Peril. So this cultural leader is speaking to his countrymen through the framework of their cultural perceptions. So this is really valuable. I was recently in Shanghai and discovered for myself that totoaba bladders once sold on the open market were not so easy to find anymore. We know the totoaba trade will not soon be gone, but there is change. It's coming. So we need to buy time in Mexico while we actively support political and cultural campaigns in China. Okay, in Mexico, I see two major obstacles to solving the vaquita crisis: corruption and poverty. In that order, because corruption is at the root of it all. The good news is, right now, there is a chance for progress, because the new president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, he goes by the nickname AMLO, he ran on a platform of clearing out government corruption. Now I know, many a president have made the same promise. But if AMLO can be supported to succeed even fractionally, the odds of vaquita's survival dramatically improve. So how do we get AMLO on board? I suggest we make the Upper Gulf an opportunity for him, a political opportunity. If he can be given a viable plan of action that can have success, he has the chance to win substantial benefits. And here's the thing. Tackling corruption in the Upper Gulf is actually doable. Because unlike places like Mexico City or Juarez, remember, these are tiny little fishing villages. Each one is surrounded by desert with only one road in and out of town, and there are relatively few government officials. Importantly, I believe that President AMLO will have the support and the gratitude of his people. I am told that most of the fishermen are honest, and those that I spoke with are really, really angry, because they are standing by watching their criminal neighbors get rich while they have no legitimate work. In fact, every Mexican national that I met wants corruption gone. They want to trust their government. They want their neighborhood safe for their children. Of course they do. So AMLO could use this opportunity to boost his public ratings. And with totoaba smuggling and vaquita conservation hot in international news, he actually has a global stage to show success for his anti-corruption campaign. That could earn him unprecedented worldwide respect. The steps are straightforward. Replace key positions with trustworthy staff so that the process of law enforcement can be both transparent and effective. And then make it illegal to possess, not just to sell, not just to transport, but to possess totoaba gillnets. Treat them like bombs, so that if they are found in your home, in someone's car, in their boat, the net is confiscated and that person goes to prison. Just imagine how quickly things would begin to change if just 5 corrupt authorities were fired from their government positions and 5 totoaba leaders were imprisoned. Also, right now, drone footage is inadmissible in Mexican courts. If that could be changed so that drone footage could be legal evidence, then unmanned patrols could take to the water. It would cut the costs and expand coverage. And I'm told the Mexican Navy already has hours of drone footage showing identifiable poachers pulling up totoaba nets. So I'm going to take a moment here and ask you to help me inspire OMLO to take this action. On your seat, you should each have found one of these cards. AZA, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, is running a 1,000,000 card campaign. And these messages, if you fill them out, your personal messages of support, are going to be hand-delivered to President OMLO. So this is a great opportunity for you right here tonight to have a voice for vaquita directly to the head guy that's going to be deciding where this future lies. All right, so now, what? I'm bored with me so far? Once corruption has been reduced and the local residents are able to begin trusting their police officers to enforce the law, then the next major issue, that of poverty, can be addressed. Let me say very clearly here, until people can feed their families, they will have no capacity to care about porpoises. So helping the humans and addressing economics is conservation. As Lorenzo Rojas, one of the lead vaquita scientists who will be speaking here next month, told me, we cannot save vaquita and have fishermen go extinct. So we need to keep supporting programs that bring new knowledge and that earn financial profits for eco-minded fishermen. A few organizations, including CEDO, let me say, are dedicated to helping fishermen develop sustainable practices. And they are making headway. Social scientists are now listening to what local residents think and what they need. And educators are beginning to speak up in classrooms and workshops and even comic books. Every effort that empowers communities to live more sustainably buys time. Interestingly, totoaba may be part of the solution too. This fishery collapsed and was closed in 1975. Totoaba, as I told you, was listed as a critically endangered species. But in the last couple of decades, a fisheries biologist named Connell True has been working at a hatchery in Ensenada, and he has been able to raise and release hundreds of thousands of totoaba back into the Gulf of California. So there are now discussions about petitioning CITES to downlist that species so that a legal aquaculture program could raise the meat for market, and including exports. And it might even allow a quota-based hook and line totoaba fishery for wild-caught totoaba. Again, if drones could be out patrolling fishermen and full prosecution for poaching was the norm, I am told that a totoaba fishery could really be viable. And let me add a related note, which is that in the 1970s, American sport fishermen were a huge source of revenue for San Felipe. And by the way, this community, San Felipe, is the closest geographically to where vaquitas are. Those sport fishermen came to catch totoabas with hook and line. Now recently, I talked with a writer for Sport Fishing magazine, and he told me that he and his associates are too nervous to travel into Mexico right now. But if corruption and cartel crime were brought into check, and if a well-enforced totoaba fishery were open, then they would likely resume that kind of tourism. And that would be a huge economic boost to the community. Restaurants could serve sustainably caught seafood, and tourists could shop. And with vaquitas living so close offshore, even non-fishers could turn a profit, capitalizing on charming porpoises with necklaces and, earrings and t-shirts. Right now, while tourism is down, a different group of foreigners has committed to stay. Despite direct threats, which you heard about a little earlier, about the boats being chased by fishermen, despite these direct threats to Sea Shepherd ships and their personnel, the leaders have announced that they will not give up their vaquita campaign, called Operation Milagro. Milagro, as most of you know, is miracle in Spanish. This direct action conservation organization has been serving in the Upper Gulf since 2015. I use the word serving because, unlike other Sea Shepherd campaigns, in this case, they are working in partnership with the Mexican government. They have been given authorization to patrol for poachers and to confiscate illegal nets. And let me say, they are definitely buying time. Mexico's Ministry of the Environment is also buying time with its gillnet removal program. With the help of many institutions and organizations, including Sea Shepherd and Museo de la Ballena and World Wildlife Fund Mexico, and a whole lot of fishermen contractors, they pulled more than 600 illegal gillnets out of the water in 2018 alone. That's 600 nets that didn't kill vaquitas. When this project started, the gillnet removal project started, they were mostly pulling up ghost nets. Ghost nets are relic gear. It's nets that were lost or abandoned at sea, that are just left floating around and wreaking havoc in the habitat. But now I'm told that almost all of the gillnets that they're pulling out are active totoaba nets. Any animals lucky enough to be found alive are rescued and released. And during my research, that included a humpback whale. Yeah, and sharks and sea turtles and all kinds of amazing animals, beautiful rays, even this beautiful little sea jelly. These amazing guys, these are Victor and Gordis. These guys are fishermen contractors, and they are actually part of the vaquita team. They are deploying scientific monitoring devices called CPODs, as you can see here, and they are also part of the gillnet removal program. These contracts offer direct economic incentive for fishermen to support conservation instead of poaching. So I ask, what would happen if we could fund more fishermen contracts? Extra eyes on the water would certainly help the situation. In fact, one of the most exciting new ideas is to partition off the now very small area where vaquitas are still found and placing guards around the perimeter, creating an on-site sanctuary. After the aborted captivity attempt in 2017, if you were here last month, you got to hear a little bit about that. Now everyone is entirely focused on saving and protecting vaquita in their natural habitat. So even if they can't enclose the sanctuary with nets, buoys would demarcate a clear protection zone. It would also create a visual barrier for poachers, a stay away sign, right? And it would establish a space that the public, you and I, could not only see, but support. Which brings us to the United States. We cannot pretend to be bystanders in the vaquita crisis. By failing to uphold our U.S. laws, we have been complicit in the species' decline. For decades, gillnet caught seafood was imported from the Gulf, from the Upper Gulf, into the United States in direct defiance of our 1972 Marine Mammal Protection Act, which basically says that no foreign fisheries will cause the death of too many marine animals. Oops. Recently, the US government was held accountable. And in response, the US Court of International Trade ruled that an embargo be placed on seafood coming out of the Gulf of California until vaquita is deemed safe from gillnets. This ruling pressures Mexico to stop totoaba poaching by whatever means necessary. And, equally important, to authorize alternative gear for every legal fishery. Gillnets are the #1 threat to marine mammals worldwide. So upholding and enforcing our Marine Mammal Protection Act is really important to a lot of different animals that are dying as bycatch. It establishes a precedent and a clear message that Americans will not tolerate the annihilation of marine mammal populations. But you should know, this embargo is devastating for those honest fishermen. It was their last thread of legal work to catch and export seafood. It's just a reminder, right? That for those things we think, we go, oh, that's such great news, it's so positive. There are negative side effects too. We need to be sensitive to these. On a brighter note, PESCA is finally talking about allowing an alternative gear called suriperas. And this is so huge because alternative gear is a critical part of vaquita conservation. If we want to save vaquitas, we need to stabilize the economy in the Upper Gulf. And in order to do that, we need to get honest fishermen back to work. The best part of this is that as soon as alternative gear is authorized, Sarah Mesnick of NOAA says there is already a whole production chain ready to move product into the sustainable seafood market in the United States. She says they could sell everything. This box, in fact, was designed, if you look up in the corner, you can see it, for vaquita-friendly shrimp. Think dolphin-safe tuna. Once this is filled and available, you and I will have the opportunity to directly support eco-minded fishermen through our consumer dollars. And that market will be supported by the fact that knowledge of vaquita is rapidly expanding in the United States. A documentary started back in 2015 by a couple of filmmakers named Matt Podolsky and Sean Vogel was picked up by Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah, so it links around, right? And DiCaprio brought in the team that created the Academy Award-winning film, The Ivory Game. So now, Sea of Shadows, as their new film is called, was premiered at Sundance and won the Audience Award. And it was immediately bought by National Geographic for distribution. So the story of vaquita will soon be seen far and wide. In fact, it's actually a little crazy to me because when I started researching in 2016, I read almost 70 scientific papers because that was pretty much all that was available. And most of the people I knew, everybody that I knew, they had never even heard of a vaquita. Nobody even knew what that was. And in just the last 3 years, that has completely changed. Now, all of these outlets are covering the story. Vaquita has gone viral. In November, I was part of a vaquita webinar that drew over 500 registrants from 22 countries on 6 continents. The world is waking up and listening. So while vaquitas are disappearing, and fast, awareness is on the rise. With more people in the know, more action can be taken. As I mentioned at the beginning, the situation is complicated and solutions are not simple. Success hinges on several, let's say, capricious factors. But the CERVA meeting started yesterday. CERVA is the International Committee for the Recovery of Vaquita. Barb Taylor, who was here last month, is part of that team. And they have converged in La Jolla. Their spring report is expected to bring some updates. By the way, these ideas that I'm sharing here are not entirely my own. They have come from discussions with many of these experts. And those experts I found are optimists by nature. You're going to be lucky enough to hear some of them speak in the coming months. I think NRDC's Zach Smith said it best when he recently wrote, "I'm no Pollyanna, but I've also never been more hopeful about how things seem to be shifting in the vaquita's favor. With organizations and institutions continuing to collaborate with one singular goal, and you and me helping with awareness and public pressure and legislation and funding, we still have time for this heroic push." If you were here last month, do you remember the vaquitas that Barb Taylor saw? Those ones I mentioned at the beginning in September? Well, one of the mothers is Anna. She is identified by her dorsal fin. And Anna is who I think of now when I think about what needs to be done. Tears will not save this extraordinary porpoise, but some immediate and well-funded action might. Toward the end of our conversation, the journalist Rich, he agreed that buying time seemed more feasible than he had expected. And he laughed and said, "Be careful. I think you're injecting me with hope." I hope I've done the same here tonight. Thank you.